If you find a puddle under your car like this one, then there's a good chance that you have an oil leak. It can be something pretty minor and just a little dribble, or it could be something much more serious that could mechanically total your engine. Either way, the best thing to do is to check your oil level first, making sure that that is at least at the minimum line, if not, in the standard range, is going to be a very useful thing to know both how serious the leak is and if it's even remotely safe to keep driving, or whether you need to leave it where it is and get it repaired immediately. It's worth noting that your car actually has a number of different kinds of oil and things that can look like oil that will drip out and leave that sort of puddle. There can be a number of different things, both engine oil, gearbox, and potentially even differential oil. You can also have your power steering fluid if you have a hydraulic system, and even sometimes coolant for your engine can look somewhat similar. So it is worth checking both that your engine's oil level is okay, but if that's fine, it might also be worth checking things like your power steering fluid, your coolant levels, and any other levels that you're able to check, like your gearbox if you have a dipstick for that, although that's mostly only on automatic transmissions. Now, assuming that the leak isn't too serious, you still have a reasonable amount of oil left in your car and the puddle isn't too massive on the ground, then it's a good idea to have a look to find where the leak is coming from. The first thing you can do is pop your bonnet, normally with a latch in the driver or passenger side footwell, and effectively just have a look around, inspect the area and see if you can find any signs of where the oil is leaking out from. You'll see what is essentially what looks like a wet patch. I should make it clear though, if you do find a wet patch, make sure that you find the source of that wet patch, as on the Astra that we'll be fixing in this video, I found that there was a wet patch on the top side of the gearbox, but there wasn't any cause for that. There wasn't any trail leading from any obvious seals, and it's more likely that that oil was just blown up as the car had been driven since it started leaking, and it effectively just got pushed up onto that top surface. If you can't find anything from the top, it's time to go under. And you'll want to remove any of the under trays, if you have any, that are blocking your view of the engine. In our case, that's just the driver's side under tray, as it's split into two sections for this car. So we removed all of the 7mm plastic screws that hold that in, removed the panel out of the way, and then we had a much clearer view of the whole engine. You can see that there's a lot of oil and of sort of dirt and crud that has built up on the engine, but what you're looking for is the highest concentration of that oil so that you can get a rough idea of where it's coming from. Remember that as you drive around with that oil leak, the oil will be wanting to obviously drip down and off of the engine, but also if you're driving around, it's going to be being forced by air, especially if it's on the front side of the engine, basically all around. Hence why some of the oil made its way all the way up to the top of the gearbox, and why you can find it all across the bottom of the sump and around that front face. Again, what you're looking for is the highest concentration, the area where it's most obvious that the majority of the oil is coming from. If you're not 100% sure of where it's actually coming from, or if you are sure and you're ready to start fixing, you want to clean the engine and the area first so that you don't contaminate any of the parts that you're taking off and replacing. You can do that with a can of brake cleaner, which makes it nice and easy, and some cloths or a brush, or failing that, you can just use a squeeze bottle of soapy water and a brush or some cloths and get it nice and clean. Once the area is clean, if you want to double check or just confirm where the oil is specifically leaking from, you can quickly start the engine, assuming there is enough oil in it, the level is between the minimum and maximum lines, so that you can build just a bit of oil pressure and let the oil start dribbling out, ideally, You'll only want to run the engine for 20, 30, 40 seconds, just nice and short, enough to build pressure, but not enough to put any heat into the engine. You do not want your engine warm while you're working on it. Buzz, you can then hopefully see at least a little dribble of oil coming out, and you can confirm exactly where it's coming from. To give you a rough idea, I want to talk through the common failure points, or things that you should be looking for that often cause those minor oil leaks. I'm not including anything more serious like your engine block exploding and blowing a hole in the side, or if you hit a rock or a curb or something and smash a hole into your sump. That's going to be a lot more serious, and I would hope that you already know about that. But the main thing that causes those minor leaks is gaskets and seals. You have a lot of different gaskets and seals in your engine. Any time that you have two pieces, especially of metal, but often even of plastic and metal, or even plastic and plastic, meeting together, you'll often have something like silicone or rubber, or even like felt or even paper sometimes, holding them together or sealing that edge. For example, your oil pan has a seal all the way around its edge where it meets up with the engine block. Your rocker cover or valve cover, the piece that covers the top side of your engine, that has a seal all the way around the edge and around the spark plug wells, or if it's a diesel, the injector wells, or just anything that goes through that block. There's often a gasket there. And so all of those can perish over time and start leaking oil. If you do work on your own car, it's a good idea to know the common failure points for your engine. Some engines are more picky, or especially more likely to have things like valve cover seals fail, and they can also often be more difficult to replace them. So again, it's a good idea to check up on what those common failures are for your engine. But the worst seal by far, I would argue, to have fail, which is also a pretty common one to have fail, is what's called the rear main seal. That's the seal that stops oil rushing out of the back of the engine where your transmission mates to it. And the reason it's such a pain is that you normally have to drop both the transmission and your clutch and flywheel, or your torque converter and flex plates, and with some engines you even have to drop the oil pan just to replace that. So that's the sort of one that I would generally leave to a garage to fix for me. Also, something of more serious concern is if you have at least one, if not multiple, turbos. They have a number of different failure points for oil, namely the inlet and outlet pipes. If the seals on those fail, then you can have obviously oil leaking out, and especially if it's the inlet pipe that's leaking, you need high pressure oil to the top of your turbo to keep it lubricated, as if you don't, if you have a leak there and the pressure is released, then you can be wearing out your turbo incredibly quickly. Much more commonly though, it's a more simple and relatively easy thing to fix, like the sump drain plug or the drain bolt, and that normally leaks for two main reasons. When the last oil change was done, either the plug wasn't tightened to the correct torque, or the washer, which is often a metal crush washer, either aluminium or copper, wasn't replaced. If it wasn't tightened up, then you can try just tightening up to the correct spec, or if it's more likely that the crush washer wasn't replaced, then you will want to both buy a new bolt and buy a new drain washer, and then take the old one out, let the oil drain out, put the new one in and tighten it to spec, and then refill your oil. It's probably a good idea if you're going to go to this trouble to also replace the filter and just basically do a full oil change, but it's a relatively simple and relatively inexpensive fix compared to some of the other ones. Luckily for us though, the problem with the 2016 Astra K that we are fixing, the B10 XFL engine, is mostly with our oil filter. As you can see, the front side of the engine is pretty nasty, and it mostly revolves around that filter. It's in a bit of a weird place. It's technically accessible, but it's also tucked tightly into the engine, meaning that it's really difficult to get a lot of the different tools and oil filter wrenches around that filter and to tighten it in place. It is also kind of strange because for this car and for this engine, there's actually a tightening spec or torque listed for this filter, which is a whopping 55 Newton meters. That's kind of insane, and essentially the standard practice advice for fitting oil filters is do it hand tight and no more, because they normally don't need any more, and any tighter and you just run into issues by when you come to take it off the next time it needs a service. Now, to fix this problem, it's relatively simple. I bought a new filter so that we can replace the old one, just in case it was just the seal itself that was sort of faulty or had some grooves or divots in it. But what we did was we had our drain pan below the filter, we unscrewed the old one and let any of the oil that was still in the oil passages drain out, and then pre-filled the new filter so that the engine wouldn't run dry at any point. Gently lubricated the seal with a very thin film of new oil, hand threaded it or tightened it in place, and then I used a 76mm oil filter socket, which is actually really handy, to use my 3/8 inch torque wrench to tighten it to spec. It felt very wrong tightening it that much, but the good news is that we then started the engine and let it run to temperature after putting the car down level and checking the oil level to make sure that that was full. But when we started the engine, let it run, get it up to temperature, no oil leaked out, which I'm very pleased about. We then put the under tray back on after cleaning it, attached all of those bolts, dropped the car fully back to the ground, and that's it. We fixed our oil leak. We made sure to check the level one more time once the car had been started and run, and we're probably going to be keeping a little bit of oil in the car just in case there is any even minor leaks that we can at least top up and get home before we actually go and fix that problem. So that's a quick look at how to find and fix oil leaks and what some of the more common failure points are. If you have any questions or thoughts of your own, feel free to leave those in the comments down below. If you want to see more videos like this one on a weekly basis, then do hit that subscribe button, and also check out the links in the description, as I'll leave some Amazon affiliate links there for you for some of the different oil filter tools, as especially that the socket. That's one of the most effective tools to use with those sorts of canister filters, and so very handy. But that's kind of it. I've got a whole load of other videos on the end cards you can check out, a load of different guides, also full car reviews and a load of different stuff, so do check it out. Otherwise, thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed it, we'll see you on the next video.